Here's what's coming up on Network Africa. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu presents 27.5 trillion naira 2024 budget to joint session of National Assembly. Sierra Leone arrests several military officers for attempted coup as ECOWAS sends high delegation to Freetown. Plus, the UN calls for more strategic partnership with African Union to find African-led solutions for African problems. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin today in the Upper Legislative Chamber in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, where President Bola Tinubu has presented 27.5 trillion naira appropriation bill to a joint session of the National Assembly for 2024 fiscal year. This is the president's first budget presentation to the federal lawmakers since assuming office. He told the lawmakers in his address that his administration will prioritize job creation, microeconomic stability, and human capital development, among other areas of concentration, although he didn't give a breakdown of the budget.
Today, I stand before you to present our budget of renewed hope. A budget which will go further than ever before in cementing macroeconomic stability, reducing the deficit, increasing capital spending, and allocation to reflect the 8 priority areas of this administration. The budget we now present constitutes a foundation upon which we shall erect the future of this great nation. Analyzing prevailing economic environment. Economic condition remains challenging both abroad and at home. Despite lingering post-COVID supply and production bottlenecks, armed conflict in various parts of the world, and restrictive monetary policies in major economies, we expect global growth to hover around 3.0% in year 2024. This relative low rate has significant implications for our economy due to our current reliance on importation. The distinguished senators, honorable members, despite the global headwind, the Nigerian economy has proven resilient, maintaining moderate but positive growth over the past 12 months. Inflation has trended upward, yes, due to the weak global conditions. To contain this rising domestic prices, we will ensure effective coordination of fiscal and monetary policy measures and collaborate with subnational governments to address structural factors driving inflation in Nigeria.
13 military officers have been arrested after Sunday's attacks on Sierra Leone's main military barracks and prisons. Well, the government says the attacks were a failed coup attempt that took security forces and residents by surprise in the usually peaceful capital city of Freetown. Information Minister Chenoba says one civilian is also in custody. Well, this is coming months after Sierra Leone's President Julius Maada Bio was re-elected for a second term in a disputed vote in June. This coup attempt in the West African nation further raises political tensions in the region, with 8 military takeovers since 2020, including in Niger and Gabon in this year. In the meantime, the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, and Nigeria have sent a high-level delegation to Freetown in the wake of Sunday's attack. The delegation comprises of the President of ECOWAS Commission, Omar Toure, Nigeria's National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, and Nigeria's Chief of Defense Military Intelligence, Major General Emmanuel Udoadenye. They met with President Julius Maada Bio, conveying a message of solidarity from the chairman of the ECOWAS and President of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu. The envoys reiterated the commitment of ECOWAS towards preserving democracy and good governance across the sub-region, while assuring President Bio of their readiness to support the government and people of Sierra Leone. Joining us now is African Affairs analyst Okwe Okpala for more discussions on Sierra Leone. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Good to have you. What would you say is playing out in Sierra Leone in light of this attempted coup that happened on Sunday? And it was just on Tuesday, yesterday, that the government, termed it a coup attempt. It seems like they had been shying away from calling it that.
Well, whether we call it mutiny or we call it coup, what is certain is that democracy in Sierra Leone is under threat. And is under threat due to two economic and financial factors. There are economic and financial factors that are responsible for what is happening in Sierra Leone. And again, is something to worry, because while most of Africa, particularly West Africa, we are rejoicing over the successful election in Liberia that seemed to be reversing the decline in democratic practices within West African sub-region. I mean, this mutiny or attempted coup seem to have reminded others that, look, there is still political instability in West Africa. And you see, the signs are there because the elections that brought President Bio into office was contested. In fact, the All Progressive Congress, that is the All Progressive Congress of Sierra Leone, they believe and they proclaim that, look, these elections were not good enough. The president did not win election, and because of that, there are, when the government came in, there are, of course, some loyalists of the APC. We within the military, we have been weeded off. And there have been cases of mutiny. They have been reported. Some military officers have been arrested before on attempted coup. So the major problem is the political problem. Elections that are not credible. Elections that the opposition don't believe that was clean. And then the other factor is the economic factor. Of course, Sierra Leone, like most African countries, import most of their goods they use. So they are vulnerable to external shocks. And inflation there is over 50%. So when you combine economic factor and political factor, then that means that there will be instability. And that's probably what is manifesting in Sierra Leone.
Indeed. I mean, since the president's re-election, just like you said, there have been political tensions in Sierra Leone. But how can these tensions be doused, so as to avoid a repeat of Sunday's attack?
I think, first, the president, this winner takes all. And whenever you manage to win an election, even if it's by one vote, or even if it's through manipulation, even if it's through violence, you begin triumphant and think that everything should be spread under the carpet. The president should embark on reconciliation, bringing every Sierra Leonean together, irrespective of the party. There should be less emphasis on parties. Sierra Leone has been divided so much along parties, just like other African countries, other West African countries. Secondly, it should tackle the economic problems head on, because the inflation is very high, unemployment is very high, and people are suffering. So, and whenever you combine these two things, political instability and economic hardship, then of course you cannot have sustainable democracy for so long. So democracy will continue to be under threat. So the best way is for him to go and begin to build solidarity among the people. begin to govern in a way that give everybody sense of belonging, even the opposition, and begin to do real electoral reform that we tell, okay, even if let's overlook the election that has gone, but let's work together to make sure that the future elections are credible and are free and fair. And then probably by so doing, the signaling, because the political activity signal to even the military that look, a military purge or or military coup can be accepted if they see that look, the political class are together and they are working together. Then even the military will know that look, nobody will accept any attempt. Even if your attempt is successful, you will not probably govern successfully. So it's important that they start building unity among the Sierra Leoneans and begin tackling economic situation.
So, Mr. Okwe, just before I let you go, I mean, there have been 8 military takeovers in this region since 2020. Niger and Gabon witnessed theirs this year. And we've also seen a solidarity visit from ECOWAS. What role does this regional bloc, have in actually stemming the tide of coups in the region?
I think all these solidarity visits mean nothing to the people of Sierra Leone and mean nothing to the people of any nation. What matters to them is that the government is addressing their issues. And that, so most West African countries themselves are not credible. Most of those who are making those visits, their elections are questionable. And the more they even solidarize with them, the more they are hated by ordinary people, because the ordinary people see it as, look, okay, you are calling external forces who behave like you to come and sustain you in power. So the biggest job is within the Sierra Leone. Let them, and the biggest job what the West African bloc should do is to make sure that real democracy takes root in West Africa. Real democracy is not only when the coup is or coup happens that you now begin to pay solidarity visit. Now work together to make sure that elections are real elections. Those who are voted in are actually voted in by the people. And when people are take office and that they are actually, you can do some peer review in a way that makes them work according to the democratic tenet. There is no victimization, there is no autocratic policies, and there is no winner takes all. The West African leaders should come together and really promote democracy, not sustain regimes. Some regimes that are very unpopular with their people and indeed may have rigged themselves into office.
All right then, Mr. Okwe Okpala, thank you so much, African Affairs Analyst, for your time on Network Africa.
Thank you, God bless. Thank you. It's my pleasure, always.
Well, still ahead on the program, former refugee and journalist Abdullahi Mire honored with this year's UNHCR Nansen Refugee Award. More details after the break. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. We continue in Sudan, where there have been more airstrikes in the capital, Khartoum, as the army targets positions held by its rival, the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, or they follow what the RSF calls a significant operation it had carried out in the twin city of Omdurman. Negotiations sponsored by the United States and Saudi Arabia to alleviate the deepening humanitarian crisis have yet again failed, and international attention has now been divided and diverted by the conflict in Gaza. Rights groups are also accusing the RSF and the allied Arab militia of committing atrocities, including mass killings in the west region of Darfur. They warn that civilians in Khartoum might face more violence. Well, it seems there's little sign of an end to the fighting in Sudan that broke out in April, with the UN saying that more than 6 million people now have fled their homes. In Burkina Faso, the United Nations says it is appalled by the killing of dozens of civilians by Islamist gunmen in northern region. It says a large number of fighters from a group known as JNIM had attacked a military base, homes and camps for displaced people in the city of Djibbo, killing at least 40 civilians. Earlier, the army confirmed that several hundred armed men had tried to penetrate its military base there. Well, Burkina Faso is battling a jihadist insurgency that spilled over from neighboring Mali back in 2015. The country is ruled by a transitional government put in place following a military coup last year. Impala Platinum Holdings in South Africa says it would not leave any single stone unturned to investigate Monday's deadly incident at its mine that killed 11 people. As a result of the accident, the company has temporarily halted operations at the Rustenburg mining complex. CEO Nico Muller said at a media briefing that the conveyance system had been tested prior to being used, and indications were the core systems were active and operational. All investigations into the cause of the accident continue.
We have lost 11 lives. That is 0 lives too many. We have been working with the Minerals Council, with the department, with everybody to the road to zero harm. And it is our commitment as a company to continue on that road.
It is quite a sad incident. It ended our effort to move towards zero harm in the industry. You remember that in 2022 we reduced the number of fatalities to 49. That was the lowest number. We're on the track to there. We were at 41, and then there was this disaster.
We will make sure that we do not leave a single stone unturned to find out what the cause is and to prevent reoccurrence. As a consequence of this incident, the Chief Operating Officer and CEO of Impala made a deliberate decision to stop every winding operation at Rustenburg until we are able to determine the failure that caused this accident, and until we are able to provide assurance that no possibility exists of repeating this at any other part of the business.
The African Union's third men's conference on positive masculinity has ended in Pretoria, South Africa, under the theme Accelerating Commitments Towards the African Union Convention Ending Violence Against Women and Girls. In attendance is South Africa's former president, Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, former president of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and many other dignitaries. The event aimed to reshape conversations and actions towards a safer and more inclusive society. Our correspondent, Innocent Semosa, has more.
Dignitaries from across the African continent are engaging in conversations that aims to shape societal norms and promote positive behaviors.
This meeting is the third of a meeting called Positive Masculinity that aims to get a convention passed by the leadership of the African Union.
Discussions are underway to accelerate commitments towards the African Union conversation, especially focusing on ending violence against women and girls.
We are hoping that at the end of this conference, there'll be commitments from men, individually and collectively, not to be involved in violence against women and girls.
Generally, societies, communities, there is a growing realization, including in international organizations, multilateral like you have with the African Union, that the battle against gender-based violence and girls, in particular violence against girls, women and girls, won't be won until we mobilize men.
So we don't want an Africa that would perpetrate the violence, those circles. Of course, we live in patriarchal system when men dominate, right? But what we need is to make sure that the men change. We go into changing, the culture, the mindset, the societal approach.
Participants at the Men's Conference on Positive Masculinity says it's time to change the status quo.
The message I have towards every single man out there is that there is no excuse for abuse. In fact, there is no excuse for any form of abuse from any human being, right? But because the highest perpetrators of GBV are men, we have to focus on that. We are trying to build a network of good men in South Africa, and the only way to do that is to have these uncomfortable conversations with these men. These young boys are looking up to us. What message are we sending to these young boys? That it's okay to slap a woman? It's okay to mistreat a young child? No.
Well, firstly is to call each other out. And I know it's very difficult to unlearn some certain things. So we are here to listen to the international message. It is not just an advice regionally, provincially, or a South Africa, but international message. So with my experience, I always say it's better to be a has-been than a never-been. Some of us, we've been there, done that. However, we are not proud of the things that we have done in the past, but we are doing things better.
Meanwhile, conversations towards a safer and more inclusive society continues. From Pretoria, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channels Television News.
Kenya's parliament has banned the wearing of a suit named after the late Zambian President Kenneth Kaunda within its building. Speaker of Parliament Moses Wetangula said the Kaunda suits, as well as traditional African clothes, are not welcome, adding that his decision to ban the clothing is due to emerging fashion trends that threatened the established parliamentary dress code. Well, Kenya's President William Ruto often wears these clothing on official occasions. This has made the Kaunda suits, which is a safari jacket with matching trousers, popular within the political class. The suit is named after the late Zambian president who loved wearing them and made them popular among political leaders across sub-Saharan Africa. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the African Union is the world's body's most important strategic partner, reiterating that the UN must work with the African Union on the principle of African-led solutions for African problems. Mr. Guterres made this known alongside the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki, on the occasion of the 7th African Union-UN Annual Conference.
And that priority, the partnership between the African Union and the United Nations, is an essential partnership for the United Nations. It is our most important strategic partnership, as Africa remains one of the key priorities for the UN. And that priority is based on the clear perception that we must work with the African Union based on the principle of African-led solutions for African problems in all dimensions: peace and security, development, climate. First of all, to recognize that peacekeeping missions do not make sense where there is no peace to keep, and that we need peace enforcing and counter-terrorism operations in Africa, led by the African Union, and with a full mandate of the Security Council under Chapter 7 and assessed contributions to finance those missions. They are the only way to be effective in fighting the kind of violence and terrorism that is now proliferating in many African countries. And second, we need to mobilize the international community to address the economic and social root causes of conflict. And that is why we are so keen on the need for reforming international financial institutions in order to make sure that they correspond to today's economy and not to the economy after the Second World War, and that developing countries have an increased role in the power system related to the decisions taken in relation to economy and finance. That is why we have been insisting on the need to change the business model of multilateral development banks, on effective debt relief, on the SDG stimulus, as a key instrument to allow African countries to be able to find the fiscal space necessary to address the basic needs of their population, which of course will also have as a consequence to improve their capacity to guarantee stability, to guarantee democracy, and to guarantee peace.
And finally, on the program, the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, has announced Abdullahi Mire, a former refugee and journalist, as the UNHCR Nansen Refugee Awards 2023 Global Laureate. Mr. Mire was born in Somalia and grew up in the Dadaab refugee camps in Kenya. However, he championed the rights to education while putting 100,000 books in the hands of refugee children in Kenya. He resettled to Norway but came back to Africa, finding work in Kenya as a journalist and setting up the Refugee Youth Education Hub Link. That's a refugee-led organization that has opened 3 libraries in the camps.
Learning art. We believe art is great.
And that's where we end Network Africa for today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde. Have a lovely day.